looking in advance. What can go wrong, and how do we fix it in advance? So this is a very strategic approach, which involves 6 steps. That is one of the tip sheets that I have is about the premortem. So one is about decision making, and one is about the premortem. So the first step is going to be gathering stakeholders in the meeting. And you want to ensure a mix of people with expertise on the topic and ability to make decisions. So for example, I was doing a consulting project for a software company in San Francisco, about 1,300 employees, which were moving to a different performance management system to basically change their evaluation from hour billed per client to a peer review system, to team-based peer review. So we gathered together the HR, the VP of the HR VP, the CFO, then the executive director, of course, 2 higher level managers, and also I encouraged strongly, based on my encouragement, 2 representatives from ordinary people, programmers. So 1 representative of the typical white males in the company, and 1 person who was an Indian woman from the diversity committee, who was in the diversity committee there. So gather them all in the room, and you want, again, both expertise and authority. Then explaining all the steps. Now, a premortem involves getting everyone to describe anonymously why the situation may fail. You ask all to imagine a future where the project definitively failed. Absolutely, no question, totally failed. And then ask each participant to write possible reasons for failure anonymously, especially reasons that might be seen as rude or unpopular. And then you want a facilitator, ideally independent, brought in from outside, to gather written comment and read them aloud. That way you don't know who said anything, you don't know anyone's signature, the person can facilitate that conversation. And so in this case, the CEO was pushing back on the anonymous kind of evaluation. I had to explain to the CEO that she would not get responses that were as honest if it wasn't anonymous. So there would be things like groupthink, which is another bias, where people defer to the expertise of the top leader, or what's known as shoot the messenger or the mom effect. And that's another cognitive bias where people are not willing to tell you the honest truth because they know that negative information will be associated with them, and they don't pass up the information up the organizational hierarchy. So both of those are things that are really harmful in group decision making, which is why anonymous decisions on a premortem are really helpful. So we gathered a number of reasons, and then we discussed all the reasons that were brought up, paying particular attention to those that seem rude, unpopular, or dangerous to careers. In this case, there were 2 major ones that fell within that category. One was that the top level management didn't have enough support for this project, for this process, and so it would fail because of that. Another one was that it would fail because it would evaluate unfairly the people who were not the dominant white males in the company. So those were the 2 reasons that were brought up that were rude, unpopular, dangerous to careers. And then we evaluated the probabilities. So percentage probabilities for each one, again, anonymously by each person independently, and then averaged them out. So the first reason, the probability of failure because of that was around 40%. The second one was 60%. Then you talk about what to do with them. Decide on several failures that are most relevant, so in this case, those 2, and brainstorm ways of preventing these failures from occurring. And so in this case, the first was relatively straightforward. Because the people with authority were in the room, we made a decision that the project would take place at least 12 months after the project was implemented. That it wouldn't be, so the top level leadership support, they would give it at least 12 months until evaluating the outcome of this process, performance management change. The second was harder because it involved diversity issues and was touchy from an HR perspective. So we decided on a couple of things. First, we talked about highlighting this problematic issue to all teams prior to them doing their evaluations, kind of the potential for bias in the evaluation process with the diversity issues. And second, we gave the diversity committee a charge of evaluating whether minorities are getting systematically lower scores and then raising artificially the scores of minorities by the average of how much lower they're getting the scores. So those two areas were, those were addressing the minority diversity issue. And after 12 months, the project, they implemented everything. After 12 months, it went fine. There were some issues with diversity, and they averaged out the scores to raise them, but it led to a healthy conversation about diversity issues within the company. So that was actually had the silver lining of having that. And their productivity improved by about 23% as a result of that change. So that they were all kind of, the outcome was quite good overall for that company.
Gleb, how long did the premortem process take?
Oh, the premortem process,
led them through this,
it's about, it's a minimum an hour, but usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours. But an hour is sufficient if there's not more time.
So they gave their kind of worst case scenario feedback, and then someone who was not part of the group?
Yeah, independent facilitator gathered them, and then we chose several things to focus on. In this case, 2, because those were the most problematic, and kind of, we decided those were the things worth discussing, and then brainstorm ways of solving them. And one of the tip sheets, like I said, is specifically describing the premortem process.